So today we're going to talk about Chapter 16. The first slide is about tariffs and non-tariff barriers as import restrictions. Ad valorem duty is a duty levied as a percentage of the value of the imported product. It is most often applied duty. For example, 2% of ad valorem on imports of leather shoes. The duty obligation is proportional to the value of dutiable cargo and bears no relation to the quantity imported.
So a specific duty is the duty rate based on the physical unit or weight or other quantity. It applies equally to low and high priced goods to the extent that the same duty rate is applied to similar goods with different imported prices. Specific duties tend to be more restrictive of low priced goods. When the price of import rises, the rate remains unchanged and the effect of the specific duty declines. So an example of this would be like a $9 per ton wheat or a $2.50 per dozen fountain pen charge.
Another form is compound duty, which is the combination of ad valorem and specific duties. For example, it would be like duties $2 per pound and 4% ad valorem on chicken imports. The next one we're going to talk about is non-tariff barriers.
So for non-tariff barriers, even though most goods freely enter the United States, there are some restrictions on the importation of certain articles. The rules prohibited or limit the entry of some imports, limit entry of certain ports, restrict routing, storage, or use, or require treatment, labeling, or processing as a condition of release from customs.
Some cases of restrictions include prohibited imports. Some prohibited imports include narcotics or drug paraphernalia, counterfeit articles, products sold in violation of property rights, and there's a few others.
Another kind of restriction are the imports prohibited without a license. So these are arms and ammunition and products from certain countries such as Cuba, Iran, and North Korea.
Another type is imports that require a permit. Such imports include alcoholic beverages, animal products, plant products, and trademarked articles. For example, all commercial shipments of meat and meat food products must undergo some type of regulation and be inspected before entering the U.S.
Imports with labeling, marking, and other requirements. Certain imports require special labeling, like for wool or fur products, most must be tagged, labeled, or otherwise clearly marked to show that the importer's name and other required information is there. All goods imported must be marked individually with the name of the country of the origin in English.
There are also imports limited by absolute quotas. These imports include dairy products, animal feed, chocolate, some beers and wine, textiles, and the list goes on.
Imports limited by tariff quotas. So the tariff rates on these imports are raised after a certain quantity has been imported. These apply to cattle, motorcycles, whole milk, certain kinds of fish, and potatoes. The tariff quotas permit a specified quantity of the merchandise to be entered or withdrawn from consumption at a reduced rate during a specified period.
And now we're going to talk about U.S. Free trade agreements. The first one is a U.S.-Israel Free Trade Agreement. This agreement provides for free flow or low rates of duty for merchandise imports from Israel insofar as the imports meet the rules of origin requirements. For a preferential tariff rate, the product must be grown, produced, or manufactured in Israel and imported directly into the United States.
So NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, eliminates tariffs on most goods originated in Canada, Mexico, and the United States over a maximum transition period of around 15 years. The NAFTA duty treatment only applies to goods wholly produced or obtained in the NAFTA region.
For the US Australia, the USAFTA from 2004, it provides for the elimination of tariffs on more than 97% of Australia's non-agricultural exports on the day the agreement takes effect.
The free trade with Central America and the Dominican Republic of 2004, the United States signed CAFTA DR with 5 Central American countries and the Dominican Republic in August of 2004. The agreement provides for the elimination of customs duties on originating goods traded between the parties.
The next one is about preferential arrangements. The Caribbean Basin Initiative provides duty-free entry of goods from designated Caribbean and Central American nations to the United States.
The ADN trade preference, I think is how you say it, provides duty-free treatment for imports of merchandise from designated beneficiary countries, which include like Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, to the United States.
Now for the US GSP, or Generalized System Preferences. Being introduced into GSP in the last slide, the GSP is a special arrangement by developed nations, which is agreed under the United Nations to provide special treatment for imports from developing nations to encourage the economic growth. Tariff exemptions and reductions are provided by industrialized countries on a specified range of commodities exported from developing nations under the GSP.
So the eligibility conditions, the merchandise is destined to the United States without contingency for diversion at the time of exportation. The cost or value of materials produced in the beneficiary country and or the direct cost of processing performed in no less than 35% of the appraised values of goods, and the United Nations certificate of origin is prepared and signed by the exporter and filed with the entry of the goods.
And now for the African Growth and Opportunity Act. It was signed into law in May 2000, and it was intended to offer beneficiary countries from sub-Saharan Africa duty-free treatment on more than 1,800 items that are exported to the United States. The program provides duty and quota exemptions on their exports of textile and apparel products to the United States market.
So the benefits are extended to countries that are GSP eligible under the existing criteria. Beneficiary countries are also exempted from competitive need limitations. So for custom brokers, these are people who act as agents for importers for activities like transactions with customs service concernings. They would be the entry and admission of merchandise, its classification and valuation, and the payment of duties and other charges assessed by customs, or the refund or drawback.
A customs broker could be a partnership, an individual, or a corporation licensed by the U.S. Department of Treasury. For the success of an import firm, finding an honest and knowledgeable broker is crucial.
So now we're going to talk about the duties and responsibilities of customs brokers. So record of transactions is when a customs broker is required to keep a correct and itemized record of all financial transactions and supporting papers for at least 5 years after the date of entry. The responsible supervision is when a licensed broker must exercise responsible supervision, and control over the transaction of the customs business.
Another thing is diligence in correspondence and paying monies, is that each licensed broker is required to exercise due diligence in making financial statements and answering correspondence, and in preparing and filing records of all customs transactions. Payments of duties and other charges to the government are to be made on or before the date that all payments are due. Improper conduct means the regulations prohibit the filing of false information, the acceptance of accepted fees from attorneys, the the procurement of information to which access is not granted, or the misuse of license or permit.
So now we're going to talk about free trade zones versus the bonded warehouses. So free trade zones are designated areas located in custom port of duty where merchandise is not subject to a tariff until it enters into the customs territory. Foreign goods brought into the free trade zone can be stored or manipulated or manufactured, where a bonded warehouse is a secured government-approved warehouse facility where imported goods are stored or manipulated without payment of duty until they are removed and entered for consumption.
So some differences between free trade zones and bonded warehouses are the costs for the use of bonded warehouses are generally less. Bonded warehouses may be established on a user's facilities and with limited degree of difficulty, and the permitted types of manipulation are more limited in the case of bonded warehouse than for a free trade zone. And now for some economic advantages of free trade zones. The first one being that merchandise admitted into the zone is not subject to customs duty until it is admitted into the customs territory.
So businesses can import a product with a high rate of duty and manipulate and manufacture into a final product that is classified under a lower rate of duty when imported into the customs territory.
Third one is that the importer can establish a duty of foreign merchandise when entered into a zone by applying for a privileged status.
Duties are paid only on the actual quantity of such foreign goods incorporated in merchandise transferred from a zone of entry into the customs territory.
And the last one is that merchandise may be reconditioned to conform to certain requirements for entry into the customs territory. And now we're going to talk about case 16.2. The main problem with this case was that Chinese products are dominating a great portion of the United States market share. Some relevant facts to this case are that China is responsible for 72% of the U.S. trade deficit in manufactured goods. China has a rising productivity in the export sector, and the Chinese government provides support to its industries through lower costs for land, energy, water, and other imports. So one alternative to this case is that the United States could cut down on free trade. Some positives to this would be by engaging in protectionism, the U.S. would be able to help aid the sale of some domestic products. Some negatives would be not only would China be affected by the cut down of free trade, but so would other countries, and there may be some political upset. A second alternative would be that the U.S. can issue subsidies to help protect the domestic market. By doing so, it would help domestic companies cut costs, therefore helping cut the price and therefore increasing demand for domestic products. Negatives to this would be that it is a very costly alternative. The third alternative, which is not necessarily the greatest one, would be that the U.S. does nothing and ignores the trade deficit. For this, the positives would be that there would be no additional costs incurred, but negatives would be that the trade deficit with China would continue to grow and domestic products would continue to suffer. So for our implementation, we've decided that the second alternative is the best for the U.S. to provide subsidies to domestic markets. Although it would be costly, it would help keep domestic products alive and boost economy. So that is it for chapter 16, and that's it.
Yep.
Bye.
Thanks.